Welcome to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. Killian, Coriander, we're here. Phantasm 4 Oblivion. What's going on?
Not much,
Hey.
not much.
Why are you laughing?
Oh man. Because it's just, I enjoy these movies, and I know some people are probably like, you know, oh, I don't know. It's just enjoyable,
It's good old fun from back in the day. So,
right?
so we're going to be talking about Phantasm 4, also subtitled Oblivion, starring obviously the late great Angus Scrimm, A. Michael Baldwin, Reggie Bannister, and also Bill Thornbury's in there too as Jody. And they're continuing situations dealing with the Tall Man from 1998, once again directed by Don Coscarelli. So let's start off with a quick take, and we'll proceed from there. Kill, I'd like to start with you because I know you have a few thoughts that you wanted to throw out there. What is your quick take on Phantasm 4?
There's a great Willie Nelson song that comes to mind. On the road again. Okay, I can't wait to get on the road again. I mean, I'm in agreement with Coriander.
Mhm.
These movies are very fun, but
Yeah.
there is a lot of repetition with
Mhm.
the storyline. I know it's the continuing saga going
Right.
after the tall man. I get it, but Reggie's on the road. Reggie meets a hot blonde.
Well, all right. Well, I said a quick take, man. Don't go
Okay,
through the
okay,
whole thing.
okay.
Jeez.
What I'll just say is it's kind of familiar territory, yet
Yes.
still fun.
There you go. Okay. All right. So, Coriander, what do you have for a quick take?
I just feel bad for Reggie. The poor guy's just trying to get a piece, and he just never does.
Well, actually, he did.
Did he?
In two.
Oh, I mean, dry humping doesn't really count, does it?
No,
I mean, come on.
I'm messing with you. All right. So look, but no, for real, a quick take on it. What do you think of the movie? You guys are
Oh,
telling jokes.
no.
I'm asking a question of a quick take. What's your quick take,
No,
Coriander?
I enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed how Mike was on a path to find out who the tall man really is.
Mhm.
And, he was, trying to find out, how his brother was really killed. So yeah,
Right.
I enjoyed this.
Right.
The
Okay.
trio was back.
Yeah. I mean, I will say this. This was definitely back to kind of being more surreal, like the original. And they kind of did away with the elements that they had in 2 and 3 a little bit more. Like,
Mhm.
did you think that, Kill? I mean, because I know you were saying that he was on the road again, but it was a lot different though, because they spent probably as much time in this movie with Mike and trying to find out about the tall man's origins than they did with Reggie, technically on the road. So,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
We're
Um,
doing some time traveling.
well, yeah, it definitely went more into a sci-fi horror type of aspect rather than traditional horror. So, but there's some things to talk about with behind the scenes too. So we'll get to that. Eric's in the chat saying, been catching bits of these Phantasm streams, still haven't seen any of the films, but damn, now I gotta. Yeah, you should check them out. You really should.
Right?
Patrick's in the chat saying the tall man was scared of cats. I don't know about that, Patrick. Slasher Fred saying, I think many people thought that this was going to be the last chapter in the series. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
at that point, they thought it could be, but there was a story, behind the scenes story that I'll get to, as far as they did have another one planned, and this movie was kind of supposed to be a jumping board to that, and we'll get to that. Let's see. Eric saying, was Killian trying a different way to say his usual peaks and valleys in that quick take? uh,
Kind of,
uh, okay. But yeah, I mean, this movie was a lot more surreal than 2 and 3, and
Yeah.
there were some more questions that were asked, but there were some questions that were answered, which I thought was pretty interesting, and some of the things that we talked about either in our part 3 episode or part 2, especially that you had asked, Killian. I knew we were getting to this point about the tall man's connection with Mike, and we got that answer in this movie, so I didn't want to spoil that, but we got some answers to that, and also some answers about Jody too. So anyways, we're going to finish getting set up. So for you guys in the chat, for you guys watching the replay, sit back, relax. You know what time it is. All right, let's take it from the top. Let's get down to brass tacks. Kill, as usual with these movies, it starts off with, the events of the previous, and it was a cliffhanger that was pretty crazy because Reggie was being attacked by a bunch of the spheres and so forth. What did you think at the beginning of the movie, how it started off?
Well, I mean, just like the other ones in this series, it pretty much picks up, right as the last one left off. And like you said, like Reggie was kind of left high and dry with all the spheres on him. I mean, for me, Reggie is the main thing that I come to see. And, the way the last one ended, I assumed Reggie would get out of it because he just has that kind of luck. But I wasn't 100% sure. So I had no idea, okay, is this going to be the end of Reggie or not? And, for me, the way it starts is kind of what I assumed was going to happen with Reggie, getting away from the orbs and so forth. And then, of course, at the end of the first one, the stuff with Mike and the orb in the head, and because I was wondering about all of that, like what was going on with him. Was he being turned into, one of the drones, or the tall man's replacement, or is he dead? Is he alive? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? So all of those were some of the questions I had, which, once this movie started, they kind of answered them quick, and I appreciated that. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that was the thing. I mean, the tall man was grooming Mike to be one of the servants, possibly a replacement. And later on in the film, near the end of the film, we kind of find out why, or how I should say, which was kind of interesting. But Coriander, what did you think of the beginning as it started? I mean, it did move kind of quick in the beginning because Reggie escapes, and then he you see him going back to his car. He gets attacked by that demon cop. So that was an action sequence that happened.
That was
What did
creepy.
you think? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, what were you thinking?
I mean, my only question too, it's like poor Timmy gets pulled through with that glass or whatever, and he's never to be seen again. It's like I'm just curious why they never went back to that character. But yeah,
Well,
I mean, and oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, finish that, and I'll get to it.
Do you know?
Well, there's a big part of what happened with this movie is that it had a much smaller budget than the other ones. It had a $650,000 budget. So they were, I mean, and I don't know if Don Coscarelli would have brought Tim back, you know what I'm saying, even if the budget was different, but I would assume that was part of it. So anyways, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you though.
Oh no, that's okay. But yeah, and it was interesting also how the tall man was like, well, we're not ready for you to die yet, Reg, so we're gonna let you go. And yeah, and then he meets up with Jody, or Jody appears to him, through the ball, and yeah, they end up going out looking for Mike.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And real quick in the chat, we got Lamar saying, "Good evening, Night Watch." What's going on, Lamar? How you doing? Nice to see you. Welcome. Neil's in the chat saying, "Sorry, I'm late. Just tried to put a Batwing costume on one of my cats, and it took a minute to get my hand to stop bleeding." Oh no! Oh man,
that is funny as hell.
Lamar says TGIF said the men with the margarita and joint.
Nice.
And saying good evening to Coriander and good evening to Killian. All right.
Hey.
But yeah, it starts off pretty quick, and it's moving. You have the action sequence with the demon cop. I thought that was actually a pretty cool sequence. And again, like you were saying, Kill, Yeah, and like you were saying too, Kill. I mean, Reggie is the comic relief. Reggie is the action. He's the every guy who somehow just keeps on making it through these situations. But after this, he comes in contact with a new lady named Jennifer. And again, you're trying to, at this point in the movie, I was thinking that it was going to have some of those same beats from 2 and 3. And it did start to change a little, because then we saw it cut back and forth to Mike, who was still trying to avoid the tall man driving away in the hearse. He finds himself out in the middle of nowhere, and then he's dealing with this thing where he's trying to find the origins of the tall man, and Jody is there being cryptic as all hell. We do find out why. You could have alluded to it, but we find out a little bit more why Jody was like that. But anyways, Kill, at this point in the story, you basically have it fork off, because you've got Mike's side of the story and Reggie's side of the story. What were you thinking about how the movie did that, which was a little bit different than 2 and 3, and what do you think of their character arcs?
Well, I got to say, this movie, it felt like the Reggie stuff was a little weaker, because the Michael stuff was a little stronger with the time traveling and him hunting down, origin stuff about the tall man. It was not remiss on me that when Mike was traveling, he went to Death Valley.
That's right.
I see that, and and it's funny, as cool as that was to see the different scenery, I could tell that maybe budget restrictions led them to say, okay, let's do some desert stuff.
Yes.
Which, I mean, it is what it is. Either way, it's different scenery for the series, and I'll take it. But I will say this, sort of like you said a little earlier, this one was very surreal, because there were so many instances with both Mike and Reggie where I'm watching and I'm wondering, is this really happening?
Yes.
Is this person really in the front seat with, Mike? Is this, person really in bed with Reggie? And you really have to pay attention, because if you're doing anything else with this movie in particular, you're gonna be like, oh, hold on, I gotta rewind, I gotta see. Why does she have 2 orbs? What?
Right.
But I did appreciate the branching storylines and actually Mike's stuff being a little bit more prominent and up front, even more than Reggie's.
Yeah, absolutely. Lamar was saying, I love this one. Reggie is the heart, like Loomis in Halloween. Yeah, that's good parallel. Good parallel. Neil was saying he was in the first Masters of Horror episode directed by Don Coscarelli. That's right. Yeah, he was. And Slasher Fred had mentioned that with the Masters of Horror too. Yeah, guys, absolutely. But Coriander, so Mike is trying to figure out the thing with the tall man, and we see that Reggie sees Jennifer in a car accident. He saves her from the wreck and all that type of stuff. She doesn't have a vehicle anymore, so of course he's gonna say, "Hey, I'll give you a ride to the next town." And they find out that they go through a couple towns and they're dead. They're dead towns. They're uninhabited. And of course, you had to have that scene where there was some type of crazy practical effect with the girl. But what were you thinking about those scenes? Because it also showed something important about with the tuning forks.
I thought, I mean, poor Reg, like I said, the tall man knows how to get to these guys. He just, sends these chicks that have, like Killen was saying, these orbs, whether they're, somewhere in their body or,
right,
in their head, it's like, crazy shit happens.
Right.
And it's just crazy. I'll be right back with you guys, okay? I'll be right back.
And in that scene, it was crazy, because he's just sitting there and you can hear the noise, and it's like, oh no. The first time I saw it, I was like, this isn't going to be good. And sure enough, you have the fact that she has the orbs in her chest. And I was just like, oh no. Kill, what did you think of that scene? And then of course, Reg has to fight them off, like we saw in the intro. What'd you think of it?
That was wrong. That was
It
wrong, and
was.
y'all shouldn't have done that. Come on. Come on. I mean, like, look, fool me once, with the girl in the passenger seat pulling her hair off, and now
Yes.
this, let Reggie, like have some fun, man. He's been
Right.
a trooper. He's been on the road for 20 plus years now,
Right.
like
Right.
trying to get the tall man. And I will say one thing, Knight.
Hmm.
I do feel the ratio of tall man busting through windows was very low, much lower in this one, because
Yes.
anytime I saw a mirror or a window, I was just so expecting, psh,
Right.
and
Right.
and poor Michael. Michael's a grown man. He looks like he's in his late 30s, and he's still being called boy.
Boy.
Look,
Well, you know what though? It could also be because obviously the tall man. Well, he's immortal, but even when we find out about Jebediah, I mean, he is a couple hundred years old. So, a 30-year-old man would be still a boy too. I'm just playing.
yeah, but give him his respect. He's a grown man. He can drink. You know.
Anyways, oh man. Uh, Neil says first there were abs of steel, then came Phantasm 4. Right. But anyways, I did think it was interesting how Mike was just getting these little clues, and it was very surreal. You didn't know if it was reality or a dream. So that part of it, I thought was pretty cool, and they worked in a lot of the scenes from the original one because, as we talked about in our Phantasm review, and by the way, if you guys have not seen our Phantasm review, please check it out. It was a lot of fun.
Mhm.
The original cut of the movie was twice as long. There was still like a whole, I think, like an hour of footage not used in the final cut. And so they were able to use that here. And I think Don Coscarelli was pretty smart because they didn't have a big budget. So how could they make this movie work? And actually, just real quick to explain a little bit of that, at least from what I was able to gather, I knew about the budget, but Canadian filmmaker Roger Avery, a self-professed hardcore fan of the Phantasm series, wrote an epic screenplay titled Phantasm 1999 AD as a sequel to Phantasm 3. It was set in a post-apocalyptic near future and would feature Bruce Campbell as a co-star. As the project ran into financing difficulties, Don Coscarelli wrote and directed this fourth installment as a precursor to the project, using numerous outtakes from the preceding films. Avery also appeared in the film as one of the Civil War soldiers. But despite these efforts, the budget for the sequel, now retitled Phantasm's End, it could not be secured. Fortunately, we finally did get Phantasm Ravager, which was the fifth film. But in other words, this film was kind of like a stepping stone to what they were trying to make the next, kind of big budget entry. That being said, the Phantasm itself is so weird, and I think this really worked in its advantage using the old clips from part one that were never seen before, and also getting back to that surreal feeling. What's real, what's not. What did you think of that, Kill? Because that's really some people like, and fans of it loved it, but there are some people that felt like, it's not enough going on, it's not making sense, and this and that. But then again, the first movie didn't make a lot of sense either. That was the point. So what did you think of it?
Exactly. I liked it because it does hail back to that original film of, you're watching it this whole time. Was Jody dead? Was Jody alive?
Right.
What? Was that really the tall man just like, standing over him and yelling
Hmm.
boy? And,
Hmm.
so I do appreciate that. And it fits. It
Yeah.
fits with the title of the movie, and it
Yeah.
just fits with everything we've come to know about it.
Yeah.
And also, it does keep you on your toes. Like I said, you really have to pay attention and wonder, is Reggie even really in bed with a blonde?
Right.
Or is that
Yeah.
all in his mind? Because there was so many
Hmm.
times also where they would literally say, it's all in his mind,
Yeah. He
and
said
it's
that
like,
about Mike.
yeah, so it's just
Hmm.
like, all right, what's going on? Like, Orb Jody, it's just a lot to it where I could
Yeah.
see people hating that. Like I need to
Yeah.
know if this is real what I'm watching.
Yeah.
But me, I just enjoyed the ride.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the franchise has been around for 40 plus years, so there were enough fans of it to make things happen, and obviously having a director that was dedicated to it. As we all know, there are a lot of franchises that just fade away, but this one was able to kind of keep going. But I enjoyed that about it being back to surreal. Coriander, how about you as far as when we get to the point where Mike is, I guess you could say, teaming up with Jody and trying to find out more about the tall man and going back through the dimensional gateway, and they find themselves like in the 1800s or whatever, and they're at the place of Jebediah Morningside, and then we start to kind of like, oh, okay, now it's starting to make some sense with some things. What were you thinking about those scenes? And shout out to Angus for totally looking different
Yes.
just in his physicality
Yeah, he looks
and
like
his
a
voice.
sweet, cute old man right here.
Yes,
He doesn't look
yes,
like the intimidating tall man that he becomes. But
right.
I love these scenes. And just to backpedal a little bit, I love the flashbacks that Michael was having of,
Mm-hmm.
when he was a kid with his brother and just
Mm-hmm.
everything. So, yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, you were saying I keep
No, I was
losing
just
my
saying,
train of
saying
thought.
this, the scenes with Jebediah and kind of learning the fact that he was a
Yes.
mortician back in the
Yeah.
day, and he was obsessed with, life and death, and trying to find answers to the unanswerable.
Yeah. Like I said, I enjoyed these scenes also, because
Hmm.
you finally kind of understood why or kind of how the tall man got into how he became the tall man,
Right. Yep.
So yeah, it was interesting shit.
Yeah, I agree. How about you, Kill? What did you think about the scenes of Jebediah Morningside, and how that
Mhm.
really started to bring things together, and we started to get some answers and some more questions too, but some answers that had been part of the series for at that point over 20 years.
Look, I agree with Coriander. Jebediah seems like a sweet old man. I just want to sit on the porch with him and hear
Right.
stories and drink lemonade.
Right.
Uh, but I enjoyed that stuff because it was sweet. It was
Hmm.
nice. It was
Yeah,
not what we're used to,
that's right.
Yeah.
But of course, as I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, when's the other shoe gonna drop? When is a orb gonna come out of someone's orifice or something? Or and like a little troll man is gonna like jump down. Oh, titty, something like that. I'm waiting for it, because one thing with this franchise, you stay on your toes,
That's
and
right. And Reggie
and
even said that. Reggie said always sneaking around to one of the lurkers, and I'm like, right? They are
Yeah.
always friggin' sneaking
they're
around.
called lurkers.
Yeah,
That's what
Right?
they
exactly.
do.
They lurk, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
No, no, no. I'm done. I definitely enjoyed that stuff. And shouts out to Angus for, like you guys were saying, his whole mannerism, his body language, his
Mhm.
accent. Just
Yes.
he softened himself up so much to just
Hmm.
really become
Yeah.
another person. It was nice. It was
Absolutely.
really nice.
Absolutely. And let me just tease this because for you guys that have been watching us, you know that usually when we do these franchises and we get to the final film in the franchise, we like to do, some cool little things, whether it's a tribute video or whatever. But I'll tease this right now for next week when we talk about Phantasm Ravager. There is a little bit of an Angus, I should say, introduction of sorts from him that was recorded that I wanted to share with you guys. And I think it's just
Nice.
fantastic. Obviously he's passed away, but he was fantastic in this role, and he was fantastic in a lot of other
Yeah.
things that some people don't even know about. So definitely tune in for that next Friday. I think it's going to be really cool to just kind of have that moment with him. And all I can say is that he appreciated the fans of the tall man. He really did, and
Nice.
I think that's cool too. So definitely look forward to that next week, guys. Real quick in the
Yeah.
chat, Lamar was saying, I did enjoy the ride. Yeah, I mean, this was a good look. I mean, obviously, detractors, will find a lot of things wrong with this franchise and fans won't. But I think that you could at least say it was a very creative franchise and they were somehow able to keep a lot of these major players together for over 40 years. You know what I mean? Like that's to me, that's just crazy. Not just one person. We've seen like in Terminator or in Stallone franchises or whatever. You'd keep the star throughout these movies, but in this franchise, you've got four people over 40 years. That's just to me, that's
Yeah.
just pretty darn cool. And the same director. So very very cool. But let's get to near the end here because we see that Jody is definitely a servant of the tall man. And you have
Mm-hmm.
that scene where he turns on Mike. Coriander, what did you think of that scene? Because it caught me off guard at first, and he actually attacks Mike. And well, I'll let you
Yeah.
go.
That was a crazy scene because you've never seen these guys, you know, uh, get into any type of a fight or anything.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it was crazy to see. And can I just say too, when Reggie put on his nice clean white ice cream man suit, it was like, oh yeah, we're getting back into
Yeah.
business because he's got this shit on. So that was
Yeah.
great
That
when he put that on.
that was cool, man. I did enjoy that. How
Right.
about you, Kill? How about you, Kill? When we see Jody kind of show his true colors and helps to abduct Mike, bringing him back to the tall man on that operating table.
Yeah, I kind of saw it coming because I haven't trusted Orb Jody since he first appeared on the scene in the last movie. Uh,
Right.
Yeah.
but to actually see it was kind of like, oh man, this sucks. Night. That's like you coming after me. Taking me to the tall man, and I'm like, no, this can't be life. This can't be real.
Oh man.
Now
Right.
I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
stab you and get you off of me.
Right. But
Yeah.
and when Mike said that too, when he stabbed at Jody, he said I had to make sure that I wasn't
Yeah,
gonna kill my
man.
brother. And yeah, it was kind of like, wow, there it is. But
And I
but
liked also too how Jody said, I died in the car crash,
yes, I was just about to get to
so
that. Yeah. So
yeah.
a good point. And he said, I died in the car crash. So the events of the first Phantasm at the end, when Reggie said, Jody died in the car wreck. As far as we
Yeah.
know right now, I mean, that was true. And it makes sense, because
Mm,
obviously this was a servant of the tall man. Jody was
yep.
was a manifestation of that. Um, and as we get further into the end, and Reggie saw them go through the dimensional gateway. Mike escapes from the tall man, and obviously that scene where he quote unquote killed Jody, and comes back through, and he says, thank you for standing with me. And Reggie's like, yeah, man, any time and stuff. And sure enough, the tall man comes through the gate, and Mike has a game plan, or at least he thinks he does. This is the finale. What were you thinking of that kill?
Well, anytime the gates come into play,
Mhm.
I never know what's gonna happen. Are they gonna end up in the hot hell dimension with
Right,
the short guy, the lurkers, or are they gonna like they did a lot in this movie, time travel? Are they gonna be in the Civil War era?
right.
It was just a lot of things, but once again, this kind of reminded me of the first movie with the game plan at the end.
Yes.
Like, hey, you lead them here, and we'll
Mhm.
drop them down in the mine. Okay, cool. But
Yep.
this time now it's Reggie and Mike with the game plan. So it was definitely enjoyable. But
Mhm.
once again, man, when the tall man is a Terminator, if you get rid of one, another
Well,
one is gonna take
Yeah,
his place.
man.
Of go
yeah,
ahead.
well, it showed that he's one of many,
Mhm.
and that scene. I also wanted to reference that scene when Mike wanted to try to stop he wanted to try to stop Jebediah from going through the gate and becoming the tall man because Jody said because Mike says, well, what happens to Jebediah, and Jody says Jebediah Morningside never does come back. and they showed
Yeah.
the tall man come back through the gate, and he had a golden sphere with him. And so again, we're like, what? We don't get it. But at the end of the movie, and then I'll throw it to you, Coriander. At the end of the movie, when Reggie tries to shoot the tall man, he can't shoot him. Of course, nothing works when you need it to work because the tall man
Yeah.
is otherworldly. And I love that scene when he just lifts Reggie up and he's like, ice cream man, a small man, da 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 da.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, holy shit, man, this is Reggie. We've come to see Reggie as that guy that just always finds a way. And it was pretty, big time seeing the tall man do that to him. But Coriander,
Yeah.
what did you think of that? And of course, when Mike had his own sphere that he was utilizing.
Yeah, he was so smart to figure out a way to make a weapon
Mm-hmm.
that, yeah, he used to, of course, destroy this tall man. But like we all say, you destroy one and another one comes. So
Yes.
it's
Yes.
crazy how he's just indestructible and,
Yep.
well, indestructible. And
Right.
yeah, it's almost like I just give up at this point, honestly, because what's the point? No matter what you
Well,
do, no
well,
matter
that's
what you
it.
fucking do.
It's funny you say that, and wait until next week. It's funny you worded it like that.
I haven't
Um,
seen the last one, so this will be
yeah,
interesting.
absolutely. It will be interesting. But yeah, so I mean, he gets blown up, and then another one
Yeah, he does.
appears. Like I said, he's one of many, and he takes that sphere out of Mike's head, which is just, I gotta
Yeah.
admit, it looked so gross. It was a great practical effect, man, but it looked so gross. But what was interesting was he goes towards the gateway, right? And I don't know if you guys
Mm.
caught this. He goes towards the gateway. He's got the golden sphere, and then he turns to look at Mike, and Angus had the look on his face like Jebediah. You guys get what I'm saying?
Mm.
And so when he goes through that gateway, he reappears back where Mike and Jody had seen him back in the 1800s. You guys follow me with that?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are you sure? Because you guys are like, so in other words, and this is just me. In other words, like Mike is in a time, it's like a time loop of sorts, a dimensional and also a time loop because he saw the quote unquote birth of the tall man, right? When he was in the
Right.
1800s spying on him. In the present day, he had the sphere taken out of his head, and he sees basically Jebediah with the golden sphere go into the gateway. You get what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to say is this is proof of the connection that he has with Mike. You know what I mean? Does that, and I know, Kill, you were asking about that, and I think part two is like, why is he after Mike? What's so special about Mike? And of course, the movies even back then alluded to the fact that Mike is special. He can have that extra sensory ability. But did this make it any more concrete to you, or make any more sense to you, or do you see it the way I was seeing it? Or what do you think, Kill?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's kind of like it answers, one or two things, but then throws another like, oh, well, okay, well, what about this? But
Right.
no, it did serve the purpose, and it did answer that query. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How about you, Coriander? What did you think of that?
Yeah, just you guys said it, you had questions answered and then you had another one thrown at you and it's like, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Neil was saying this franchise is unique in so many ways. There's nothing else out there that's quite like it. I
Yeah.
agree. I really
Yeah.
do agree. I truly do agree. When you're talking about franchises, I definitely agree in horror. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think that the ending did ask a few questions, but it did answer some of the bigger questions, or at least some of the big questions in the franchise. But the other thing too is we see the tall man, basically Jebediah, because of the way that Angus looked back at Mike, and he had that innocent look. So we see the birth of the tall man that's directly connected to Mike, and then he told Reggie he was dying, and Reggie's like,
Yeah.
"No, hang in there, hang in there." He's like, "I'm gonna come back for you," and he goes through the gateway after the tall man, presumably to whatever, kill him or whatever. And then as Mike is laying there, he has that childhood memory of himself walking down the street, getting into the ice cream truck with Reggie, and he can hear the conversation that him and Reggie are having. So, in other words, he's in two different time periods or dimensions, however you want to word it. He can hear his future self. He can hear himself at the point of
Yeah.
possibly dying. And again, it's all surreal. It's all weird and entangled. And like you said too,
Yeah.
Kill, the tall man had said just minutes before that to Reggie, it's all in his head, which of course is what the fortune teller said in the very first movie. And we saw her appear with Jebediah Morningside too. So it's like, you know what I mean? It's crazy. This movie
Yeah.
is, this franchise is crazy, but I like it. You know, it's weird, and I like it. That's just me. You know, for
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
people, for some people, they would much prefer concrete things, and I can understand that. But the other thing I want to mention too, and you guys let me know what you think. I think the strength of this franchise is in its whole and not the sum of its, not its parts. In other words, you couldn't watch Phantasm 4 alone and get as much out of it as you could watching the series, you know what I'm saying? Watching the other movies
Yeah.
before it. Um,
Yes.
and I think that that's an interesting thing, for this franchise is that they're so closely linked to each other. Some people might think it's a disadvantage because it means that the individual films might be a little bit weaker. And maybe they are, but it is a franchise. So when you watch them back to back, like we've been doing for this review series, I think it's a pretty cool, long
It's a fun
story.
ride. Yeah.
It is a
Yeah.
fun ride. I will
Yeah.
say, and it is very, very fun. Real quick, as we start to end up here, we do have a couple fun facts for you guys that we'll go over. And I'll start off for you, Coriander. The first fun fact that we're going to deal with, it talks about the filming schedule.
Yeah. 23 days was, what it took to film this movie.
Oh, wow. All right. Not too shabby. Okay. And our second fun fact, Kill.
Reggie's song.
The song that plays during the end credits, Have You Seen It, was composed and performed by Reggie Bannister and his band under the name Reggie B and the Yiz Wailin' Yad Doggies. It's in their album Fool's Paradise.
Nice. It is a cool song. I don't know if you guys, I don't know if you heard the song at the end, but it actually is pretty cool. And it has the theme to Phantasm woven into it. It's a rock song, and
Yeah.
it actually is a
Yeah.
cool song. I like it. All
Right.
right. The next fun fact is Bob Ivy.
Burned his feet performing the dangerous fire gag involving the exploding car.
Okay.
Mm.
All right. Our next one.
Angus Scrim.
Was suffering from laryngitis during the filming of the opening scene.
All right. The next one, the director's family.
The dwarf that gets shot in the face with the handgun by Reggie was played by Don's
Coscarelli.
daughter. Yeah, his daughter.
All right. Nice. That's pretty cool. All right. And our last
Right?
one here, Kill.
Iconic music.
Yeah, the composer of the main theme, as well as the music for all the Phantasm films, died shortly after the film's release.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
Wow, man. Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, that's rough. But back to your other point about Don's daughter playing the dwarves, they were able to cut a lot of corners in this movie. It was pretty interesting how they did it. Like with that Civil War scene, they actually hired a reenactment group to do that scene, and it was just in exchange for like $200. You know what I mean? So
Nice.
I gotta give Don Coscarelli a lot of credit because they could only use a few sets. So obviously they used the desert scenes, like you were saying, Kill, and they just figured things out. The swarm of the spheres that you saw, we played it a little bit in the intro and so forth, and it was in the beginning of the movie. It looked like 1,000, spheres. That was done by it was a group of fans, rabid fans of the franchise that worked on the digital effects for that. So it's like, you rarely hear about a franchise that has so many people kind of helping to push the ball along. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like I said, this had the smallest budget of these sequels, and some people will obviously look down upon that because it's a bit more of a sparse movie. But I really appreciate everybody that joined in to try to make this thing happen, to try to continue this franchise that has a really cool rabid fan base. So my
Yeah.
final thought was I enjoyed it, and I think it's a nice link in the chain of this franchise. And when I first saw it, obviously years ago, it just made me want to see the next movie so bad. But of course, there was an even bigger gap between that and Ravager. But finally, we did get Ravager, and we'll talk about that next week. But final thought for you, Kill, on Oblivion. What would you say is your final thought on it?
I appreciated the information dumps. I appreciated learning more about the tall man and his origins,
Mhm.
and wanting to hang out with my man Jebediah. I definitely enjoyed the diverging paths where Michael, he really had his time to shine. I think, other than the first movie, this is the most Michael that we've
Yes.
had since the first movie,
Mhm.
Yep.
which was, a good thing. And as much as in the last movie, as I liked Rocky and I liked the kid that could shoot, the
Hmm.
fact that it was really just Michael and Reggie and their past, and then Orb Jody doing his little spy game stuff, it
Hmm.
really kept the focus more narrow, but more just solid, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because you didn't really cut to, Reggie being ambushed by, like, people wanting to
Yeah.
steal his car, and
Right.
him being saved by someone, and but
Yep.
yeah, so it was a good ride, definitely.
Nice. Cool. And how about you, Coriander? Any final thoughts on it for you?
Enjoyable. You know, I really enjoyed seeing, like Killian said, Jebediah, and spending some time with him on the porch, and yeah, it's just, and like we've all said, these movies, they're enjoyable, and yeah, I have really nothing bad to say about it.
All right, cool. Well, that'll be pretty much all that we've got then on Phantasm 4. It was a fun ride. For you guys in the chat or watching the replay, please let us know in the comment section down below. What did you think of Phantasm 4? What do you think about the series in general? Any big points or things that you didn't like? Definitely feel free to let us know about things you may not have enjoyed as well. Let us know in the comment section down below, and we can have a conversation about that. Also, please give the video a like. That would help to support the channel. We really appreciate that. And also, if you are not subscribed to the Night Watch Zone, please do so. We'd really appreciate that as well. And we will be catching you guys next week as we finish up the series with Ravager, and that should be really fun. And like I said, we'll have a small little tribute and introduction that is by Angus Scrimm himself. I thought it was really cool. And it's, again, he was really good in this role. So we want to at least take a
Yeah,
moment,
I'm
take a
excited for
moment to,
that.
yeah, take a moment to just, pay respects to him. As we head on out, Neil is saying, great stream, guys. I'm about to kick back with Joe Bob Briggs' Halloween special on Shutter in a few minutes. All right, brother.
Nice.
That sounds like a good time to me, man. Thanks for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. And we will catch you guys later. If you're watching this, if you're listening to this, you're the Night Watch. Peace.
Up to
Peace.